Serious tattoo artists, what was your worst mistake and how did the client react? So I didn't mess up, but I had a client scare me. I was tattooing his sister's name on him. She passed away. Gabriela with one L in it. Past the point of no return, he asks me there's 2 L's. Right? I think I had a heart attack. And he started laughing. He thought it was hilarious. I died a little and pretended to laugh. My artist didn't mess up, but scared the shit out of me. My first tattoo from him was a lighthouse with a symmetrical pattern on the bottom. It's a red American traditional flower with wings of other green, orange, yellow, and red petals curving away symmetrically. You can see it in my post history. He finished one side, then was coloring the other side that I couldn't see, and I heard him whisper "oh duck." Turns out instead of working with the yellow first for a fade into orange, he accidentally did the orange first and couldn't really work in the yellow. Not a huge deal and not noticeable at all, but he certainly made my heart skip. I tattooed Philippines 413 instead of Philippians 413 on a girl one time. Fortunately I was able to fix it though. My only spelling mistake ever was in Italian. Girl wants a phrase in Italian. She writes it down no less than 5x on a paper. I tell her to make sure it is correct. I don't speak Italian. She insists it is correct. I draw up some nice script. Tattoo it with no issues. Bandage. Pay and she leaves. She comes back in hysterical and tells me I spelled it wrong. I hadn't thrown out the paper. I spelled it exactly how she spelled it. I asked what she wanted to do, and she decided ain't no one I know speaks Italian. That was about 15 years ago. I often wonder if she ended up getting it covered up. I had a client who decided he wanted lettering on his forearms. Sayings in Greek and Hebrew. He doesn't speak either language, but he had one of his friends double check the spelling before he sent the references to me. Came in. We did the tattoos. Pretty simple appointment. Fast forward to a couple weeks later. I get a message from my client about the tattoo that was done in Hebrew. He owns a small construction/restoration company and has a few Israeli guys who work for him. Apparently, they were giving him a lot of shit for his Hebrew tattoo. He originally thought they were just messing with him because it was spelled wrong. The font he had chosen off a quick Google search essentially changed a couple of the letters, kinda like the difference between an F and a T, making it a completely different word. We ended up being able to fix it pretty easily and had a good laugh about it. But definitely beware when you're getting tattoos in a language you and your artist don't speak. I was working at a place when a guy came in for a full back piece of 3 different cars. It took like 4 visits to finish, and each visit he'd look at it and say it looks awesome, and then he would take off. On the last visit, they called me in to look at it to show me how awesome it turned out. Well, all the steering wheels were on the wrong side, and the reason no one caught it was because a dude was looking in a mirror to check his progress, so they looked correct. I'm pretty sure the guy was super chill about it when they offered a bunch of free work and they fixed it in another session. I was a receptionist at a tattoo shop. One of the artists misspelled neighborhood on this guy's neck. He spelled it neighborhood, leaving out the first H. Neighborhood was the guy's nickname. It was a pretty large, elaborate tattoo, so there was no fixing it. I don't think I have ever cringed so hard in my life. The guy was surprisingly really cool about it. He did see the drawing and approved it before it was tattooed on. He ended up making the artist tattoo a H on his palm, so if anyone gave him shit about the misspelling he could smack that person with the missing H. I gave a guy a tattoo in prison of his girlfriend's name on his arm. I knew him on the street and his girl and knew it was going nowhere and insisted he change his mind. He didn't. So I made a bet with him that shit was gonna go belly up within 6 months. When we got out of segregation and back onto the yard, a few weeks passed at most, and I can see him having a bad conversation on the phone. He called me over to his cell and offered me up a huge ducking sack of commissary without a word. I didn't take it. Figured he needed it more than me. Still feel like shit to this day. Edit. I thought I was gonna get dragged, but you Methodicas are supportive as hell. Living out here is ducking hard. D. And every time I go to bed I dream about being inside again. N. I saw a psychologist like 2 weeks ago and she said I'm showing classic signs of PTSD and institutionalization. N. I keep putting off my follow-up appointments, but I'm gonna reschedule. E. Thank you all. L. My ex did a large scarification on the client's abdomen. The client had brought in a piece of paper with the stylized word perseverance. I was invited in midway to see the progress and had to tap my ex on the shoulder for a spelling lesson. Tattoo artist here. Best case I ever saw. A guy came into our shop asking about a cover up. The tattoo wasn't done at our place. He had what we call a belly rocker. One of those lettering tattoos that arcs over the belly. Think Tommy Lee's Mayhem tattoo. Usually gothic font. Gangster type piece. He had beautifully executed, bold, black, Old English letters across his belly that were supposed to read, "Scarred for life." Whoever did the tattoo, as well as the tattooed guy, had forgotten one of the letters, an R. This guy came in with "Scared for life" on his belly. We showed him some cover up options, including full torso, Japanese style bodysuit stuff. Someone may have joked about doing the old proofreading trick of just putting a little red arrow and adding the missing letter. I don't know who did the thing, but never saw him again after giving cost estimates for the giant cover up 15 or so years ago. We still joke about this one. I was doing a big old tattoo of Cringer, aka Battlecut, on a really cool client's leg. I got so into doing this big, awesome tiger head that I forgot that it wasn't a goddamn tiger and colored the stripes black. I realized about a third of the way through filling them in and let the guy know. He was disappointed, but mostly okay with it. I felt like I was going to puke. I finished the thing feeling so ducking sick and then refused payment. Man, going from that feeling of elation to immediate crushing disappointment was hard to shake and kind of dazed me. It was extra crushing because it was a fun tattoo during a time when I wasn't that busy and was doing mostly absolute dreck. The payment was just the icing on the top, so letting that go was hard too. Just thinking about it now is making me feel sick. When I was but a wee baby piercer, I worked at the biggest shop in my city, which had 14 artists and 2 piercers. It was the peak of the tramp stamp trend. I'm still so sad that was the nickname. Ass Sandler's was so much better, so when a super tiny 18-year-old black woman came in and wanted her name on her lower back with a flower, it was just normal. An older white male tattoo artist took her to pick a font. It took a minute, even though back then everyone went with Edwardian, but they came out. I had her do paperwork, and he got the drawing finished. She okayed the design. She okayed the stencil. She sat for the tattoo. Loved it. Tipped him and left. 2 hours later she called back sobbing saying we ruined her life. The counter girl told her to come in, and we would fix whatever was wrong. Tattoo comes back with her 2 gigantic, angry AF friends who are ready to freak out. We finally see the tattoo. Her name was Whitney. The N got left out in the font process. So huge across her lower back it said Witty. It was covered for free, and with many apologies, with 3 giant purple roses. The tattoo artist was so ducked up over that he didn't come in for a week. It was an honest mistake, but it was the worst ducking spelling error I've seen. I was working at a shop in New York City. This very heavy-set gentleman came in and wanted a full back piece. No other tattoos. The design was very elaborate and quite good. Once it was all approved, the tattoo stencil was applied and again approved by the client. I wasn't doing the tattoo, but I was occasionally checking in on the process. Once the line work was done, as shading had begun, I noticed something horrible. The stencil was applied over his rolls of skin on his lower back. I made a comment to the artist privately. He went back to tattooing, moved the skin apart at one point, and without a doubt several inches of untattooed skin. The client never noticed. I stopped working there not too long after that. Not for this reason. I've always felt so bad for that guy. I've never really made any big mistakes that garnered a reaction, but one of my clients has a tattoo from another artist in a local studio that says Gradad instead of Grandad. The studio fired the artist and wouldn't take any responsibility for what had happened. Recently I did a band of sheet music on this walk-in, and I put one of the segments on upside down. because I don't read music, and it looked right. Client noticed when I was about halfway done with that segment. Luckily she was cool and just said she should have checked her stencil harder and shrugged it off. Did my first one on an old schoolmate who was aware of my artistic abilities despite having never applied ink before, and he offered me his back. I had 3 pros watching as I drew a geisha free-handed on his back while he was hunched over. When the design was laid out, he checked it in the mirror and was good with it, so I began lining it. The thing is, the other artists said it looked great, but unfortunately I was doing something else when he checked it, so I didn't notice just how screwed up it really was. Anyway, I lined it and we took a break. As he stood up while I was watching, my heart dropped as I witnessed the geisha's face droop into a palsied state on one side. He was sitting leaned forward with his elbows on his knees while drawing it, and so distorted the canvas. Now, this sounds shitty, but I never really liked this guy too much. He originally wanted a back full of strippers, so I didn't feel bad that when he went to look in the mirror, he lifted his shoulder to look at the tattoo, which normalized the proportions, and he said it looked awesome. Well, good then. Big lesson learned though. I still have the occasional nightmare over it. I watched my boss turn a stylized Tierney, mistress name, into Diane, wife's name, once. I'd never believe it if I didn't see it with my eyes. As other artists have said, none besides some blowouts and wonky lines that were fixable when I was a new artist, but I fixed some really ducked up ones. Mostly spelling mistakes. Some terrible ones. But I had to do a cover up of one of a guy's son. The portrait was wonky and obviously done by a kitchen wizard. The worst part was that all the designs the scratcher did around it were for a girl. They weren't approved by the client. The scratcher that did it thought it was a little girl and did all kinds of pinks and hearts and bows in the hair and around it. The worst part, he wrote, "Daddy's girl." The lettering basically butted right up against the portrait on top and bottom, so just covering up the designs wasn't possible. It needed a full-on cover up, which I would recommended regardless because of the shit portrait by itself. So we covered it up with an approved design and he came back to my shop for my version of the hyper-realistic portrait of his son that he wanted. Misspelled the name Jamie. Jane. I asked the client for the spelling and showed the client the laid out script before it was applied. So not my fault. The client was very disgusted with himself for not knowing how to spell the name of the woman he loved enough to show it on his skin for life. I felt sorry for the guy, so I offered him a cover up at an incredible discount as well as the name reapplied spelled correctly. Unfortunately he never took me up on that offer. Moral of the thread here is double check any words or numbers. Dang. I'm late to the party. This didn't happen to me, but to an artist that used to work in the booth next to me. Some lady comes in and wants a pocket watch with roses in her arm. So my coworker agrees to do it. The client specifically wanted the pocket watch to be stopped at 420. He draws it up for her right arm and she's so excited, but for some reason she decides to change it to the left arm last minute. No problem. He runs in the back to the printer to mirror the image. She loves it, and they slap the stencil on and start tattooing. When they're almost done, he realizes when they mirrored the image, the clock doesn't say 420 anymore. It says 740. He doesn't know what to do besides finish the tattoo. When the client checks it out in the mirror, she doesn't notice, and ducking loves it. The lady ended up coming back a few weeks later to say once again how much she loved it. I always wonder if she ever found out. Worst was when I just started out tattooing. A few months in, I'm tattooing her old coworker's wife and she's getting some Roman numerals, and before starting I ask her to triple check the numbers and she's like, yup, all good, let's do it. 1 hour after being done I receive a text from my old coworker that the one of the letters are wrong. That was a great week to be alive dealing with that anxiety. This will be buried, but it's worth a shot. I work at a tattoo shop with a few artists. One of our artists ducked up tremendously on a face tattoo. She did the stencil beforehand and showed him. After his approval she started above his brow. He wanted cursed, but he left the shop with custard tattooed on his forehead. He was pissed, of course. Never saw him again. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.